Good morning. Another busy period for the whole response across the Northern Territory, obviously, but the absconders were one that clearly took a significant period of our time. So we've established it between 4 and 5 a.m. this morning. 3 youth, 15, 16 and 17, chose to abscond. They scaled a fence. It appears that our patrol had recently just gone past, and then they effected their move across the road to then go over the fence and abscond. We tracked that then through our CCTV to identify the clothing they were wearing, and then obviously mobilised our resources and put the call out for the public once we'd established, following the room audit, that 3 were unaccounted for. We found those individuals a short time ago in Palmerston on the outskirts. They saw police, knew obviously that we were looking for them. They chose to try and flee, but we headed off into the bushland and ultimately located them. They've now been secured and returned to the Centre for National Resilience. We'll go through the process of debriefing them at the moment, but early indication is that we're not aware that they've had any contact with anybody else. They've obviously tried to keep a low profile from what we can establish, but we'll do a full inquiry into that to understand where they fled. I hasten to add, the reality is these are young people. To move from remote communities where overcrowding is very present to being placed into a single room and the isolation that that may feel, we believe is somewhat of an indication. We're going to work with the health teams to understand whether we can cohort some of them to try and break down some of that loneliness that may be a trigger to it. But I also want to point to the overwhelming compliance that we've had, given several hundred people have been placed into the Centre for National Resilience linked to the clusters from Robinson River, Katherine, Binjari and Rockall, and that compliance continues to be a testament to the large majority. It's just unfortunate that 3 young people chose to make the decision they did, and they'll ultimately face a sanction in relation to that. Irrespective of that, what is concerning is that the absconders have been somewhat on a higher pace in recent weeks. We're going to move to additional mobile CCTV cameras to those areas. It's a 165-acre site, the Howard Springs facility. That is an enormous footprint. And as you can appreciate, we cannot have human resources on every single access and egress point to that facility. It is not a jail. The people in there are not criminals. They are people who have unfortunately been caught up in the reality, and I say reality, of COVID-19. And we have positive cases there currently infected with COVID-19. So it is highly serious. The preference clearly is that people stay in that facility. We are actively engaged each and every day, literally room to room, for people to be able to speak to our people on the ground to provide support, and I urge everyone in the facility to do so. When you have in excess of 1,500 people, which we currently have, from time to time people's emotions will get the better of them. So it is not uncommon that we're responding to calls for assistance throughout those periods of time. They're always relatively low-level incidents, but we respond immediately to provide reassurance and to provide whatever assistance we can to everyone on the ground. Katherine, great news about the double vaccination, and we've made the move to make sure that the home quarantine is available to you today. So please, if you are looking at that model, start the application process and we will hopefully be able to facilitate that for you. The great news for Robinson River, 66 people from the Centre for National Resilience will be repatriated to Robinson River today, another 8 tomorrow. I just really want to praise the complete effort that occurred in Robinson River, to the community, to the key people on the ground that provided support and assistance, to Sergeant Cara Hen, who was the forward commander, the health teams. There'd be a fine in my agency. The team didn't know each other. There's a great story that's been written by Cara about the fact that that team didn't know each other when they first got on the plane. All walks of life, all there for the single purpose of providing support and assistance to the Robinson River community. It's just a fantastic thing to see today that we've got you into this position. So thank you very much for your cooperation and assistance. To the people in Binjari, we're still there for you. We will continue to support you, so don't worry about that. We'll make sure that we've got every support we reasonably can for you. People in Largemanu, we're actively doing the work. You would have seen the testing regime that's in place. Some 700 tests is pretty much a significant part of your population being tested, and the negative wastewater is encouraging. So hopefully the lockout will assist with a little bit of freedom to move around within community for the double vaccinated, and we're hopeful that we might even be able to go to a different posture tomorrow if the current testing trend continues. So what does it mean for us? Well, we're not resting, because obviously moving people back to community, helping Robinson River repatriate and recover from their COVID-19 experience. So we will still be on the ground providing support for them to ease that transition and allow them to get back to a life of normality before Christmas. And again, as I've just spoken to, we'll continue our support to those communities that have still unfortunately got the threat looming over their head. Thank you.
Commissioner, Howard Springs is lauded as gold standard in quarantine, but in the past few days we've seen two sets of people, a group today and another individual late last week, escape from there. How concerned are you about the security situation there, and what, apart from the CCTV, are you going to be doing anything else?
So we've already bolstered additional resourcing, but as I say, when you're dealing with 165 acres, you have to build a bridge of trust with people, and unfortunately this recent event is some juveniles that have made a poor decision. However, irrespective of that, we want to try and make sure that there's stronger visible deterrence, but more importantly, the moment that we see anyone move from within the perimeter of where the actual accommodation pods are, that we can move more swiftly to get to them. So we're bolstering external security to provide further assistance with that. As I say, increased CCTV, ensuring that that is actively monitored 24/7. So the moment we see any movement, we can try and respond and keep everyone within the perimeter.
When I was member in charge, they were considering using bracelets to monitor people's vital signs and also kept a track of where they were. Is that still something that's used at Howard Springs now that it's under the MT government's control? And was that used in this instance?
No, and to be fair, the trial that they did was simply that. They trialled it. Many people didn't choose to take it up. That was exclusively for the international cohort. I hasten to add, we've dealt with thousands and thousands of people through the Howard Springs quarantine facility, and so the compliance rate is exceptional, well over 99.9%. What we've done in recent times, and sadly, we know that youth learn behaviour from the poor actions of adults. That absconder that went, and obviously we had to put into the public domain, they had left, that male adult probably sowed the seed in their minds. The message to everyone is, please don't leave. It's too big a risk for the Northern Territory community.
So just on the person who fled last week, have any charges or infringements been issued, and also what kind of infringements or consequences will the teenagers today face?
So the breach of a show direction is a $5,024 fine, and so that is very clearly the most likely charge. As we go through any further investigation, we'll determine if there's any other measures in place, but as it strictly relates to the show breach, that is the appropriate sanction.
And to be clear, has the individual from Friday, I think it was last week, they faced that infringement?
Correct.
There was a pretty large police presence in Checkpoint just on the side of Howard Springs. Car boots are being checked by police. What were the sorts of things that did we believe that they could be hiding in these cars?
People. Look, this is a common practice when you've got absconders, and particularly juveniles, which we were able to establish relatively early. They would have little to no means, so we obviously had to turn our minds to what avenues would they potentially explore to try and get out of the area where they would have had a reasonable suspicion that we were going to be swarming, and we did. But of course, a boot is a place, as are back seats, where people can ultimately hide, and it's not always apparent if you're jumping in a car, particularly from a rural area, that someone may have chosen to secrete themselves in the back of your vehicle and wait for an opportune time to escape.
Didn't get in the car, they walked to Palmerston?
That's our indication.
Do we know where they escaped from the Howard Springs Centre or absconded from? Do we know if that's the same area of fencing that the individual last week also left from?
No, where we understand they've gone through is simply part of the perimeter fencing, and that was an avenue, as I understand it, close to where their accommodation pods are. Again, it's a case that there's not barbed wire on this facility. It's not a detention centre. It is a quarantine facility, and it should be ample information for people to know that the risk that they pose by leaving that facility.